We are live. Welcome back to the Zohar. It is great to see you all here today. I am excited. We will dive in. Um, so we're exploring, just for anyone kind of joining us recently, the upside and the dark side of Chidushei Torah, of novel ideas. Now, novel ideas are crucial to the Zohar as a novel idea. This topic, though, gets at the heart of the Zohar itself, because on the one hand, it's some kind of new mystical revelation, the 13th century, that kind of thing. And on the other, it's Kabbalah, and it's specifically rooted in this notion of being passed down person to person, a mystical tradition that one doesn't invent, but rather receives if they're worthy. And the whole frame of the Zohar, to whatever extent it's novel, is to cast the teachings as ancient in the mouths of the Tanaim, of the Mishnaic figures. And so the very novelty of the Zohar and its interpretations, it's not just that it's new, interpretations are wild and imaginative. And yet, there's this deep conservatism to the edifice of the Zohar. So that piece is, I think, animating some of the teachings that we'll do today. Last time we'd spoken about some of the power of Chidushei Torah, of novel ideas. And just to summarize, the Zohar, of course, a beautiful language for it, but when a new regular Torah idea emerges, that reaches up to a certain level, maybe to, well, we could discuss that. But when a new mystical idea emerges, which is what the Zohar is really interested in, that jumps from Yesod, which is this place of covenant, of Brit, of Torah, of relationship with God, and flies up to Atik Yomin, all the way to Keter, to before the world was created, to before there are words. It moves to a wordless place. And so it then has this power to recreate new worlds that haven't yet emerged by going to a place of pre-creation. So that's where we were. That's where we were. The power of mystical teaching to literally recreate worlds. Okay, so welcome everyone. So let me just share the screen. We'll pick up. Where is it? Do you see Aramaic text of the Zohar on Svaria? Yeah. Okay. And I don't know if I'm actually hearing people or not. I may or may not be. So if we're not, and you're saying something, can someone say something just so I know if I hear you?
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, we got you. Okay, great.
Everyone was muted up till a moment ago, so maybe, yeah.
It's so rare. I'm so used to never even being able to get a word in edgewise and then suddenly silence. So either, I don't know what's going on. It's 2020. I'm a Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, on this subject, Mahu uvitzel yadi kisiticha, and just so people know the format, we're going to read the Aramaic more or less uninterrupted because of the beautiful poetry of the Zohar, and then go back and work through in translation, which is a language more people understand. But the Aramaic certainly gives a texture, and for those who are kind of more familiar with Rabbinic Hebrew, there's enough resonance that it should be helpful. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Mahu uvitzel yadi kisiticha, Amar le, b'sha'ata te'itz masar oraita leMoshe, atu kama ribo de malachei lain, le'okta le b'shalhova de pumhon, adechafa ale kutshibrichu, v'hashta dahaimila salka v'itrat v'kaima kame kutshibrichu, yuchafe alehi mila v'chase alehu barnash, de lo yishtamoda legabayu ale kutshibrichu. Lo yikanun legabe, ad di'it avid me'ahi mila shamayim chadashim ve'eretz chadasha, Hadahu dechtiv uvitzel yadi ki siticha lintoa shamayim ulisod aretz. Mikan dechol mila desatim me'ena salka litoalta ila hadahu dechtiv uvitzel yadi ki siticha v'mai itchafe vitkase me'ena begin litoalta ila hadu dechtiv lintoa shamayim ulisod aretz kemade itmar. That's the wrong page. Here we are. Rabbi Elazar, people see us? Rabbi Elazar asked, what is the meaning of, I have covered you with the shadow of my hand? God says, I have covered you. The full pasuk in Isaiah is that God has put words in our mouth. Those are, by the way, as we did in the past week's Chidushay Torah, they're not our words, but there's some way in which by us sort of becoming conduits for words of Torah, we're kind of messengers. We're like a prophet. We take on this prophetic status of saying the words of God. So God puts his words in our mouth. Note how everyone is suddenly a prophet. There's a radical egalitarianism to the mystical experience, to be tampered momentarily with demons again. I've put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand. So what is the meaning of I've covered you with the shadow of my hand? What does it mean God has covered us with the shadow of his hand? In the verse in Isaiah, just so you understand, it's a metaphor. And the prophetic metaphor is God gives us his words, and then he covers us like soil covers a seed and protects it from the harsh sun with his hand. That's the plain meaning, according to most commentators of the verse, that God takes his hand and, like soil, with a sense of nurture, covers us. But what does it mean here? So here it becomes the idea of a seed in the soil tucked away and covered, or God's hand covering us after we have his words, becomes a riff or a meditation on revelation versus keeping things inside. So he replied, when the Torah was transmitted to Moses, myriads of celestial angels came to scorch him with flames from their mouths. And this is reflected in many midrashic and Talmudic traditions that say, like, what is a human, what is a mere mortal doing here receiving the Torah? The angels get very upset when Moses is receiving the Torah. So here they come to kill him with flames, but the Blessed Holy One sheltered him. Now, when this word ascends, and this is the language we talked about before, this word means a word of mystical insight. You have a great teaching, and it goes up from your mouth in the present world to a place of yesod, of covenant with God and the Torah, to before existence, to reaching out to a place that is beyond this world, is crowned and stands before the Blessed Holy One. He shelters that word and covers that person so that he will not be discovered by them. Them, who is them? Here, them, I think, is the angels trying to kill him, but also maybe proxy the people trying to kill you for your new novel word. Because if your word is that novel, you'll probably develop people that don't like your novel words, arousing their jealousy. But the plain meaning is angels in the Zohar text, but I think there's an intimation also of people. And why? Why are they trying to come? So it's rooted in anger, like you're not worthy, you shouldn't, etc. But really, the Zohar roots it in bikanun, in kina, in jealousy. They're jealous. And angels are, of course, jealous because they can only follow orders. And so they can't create novel insights because they don't have the power of independent thought. So one of the incredible things, perhaps the Tselem Elohim of the divine image of people, is that they can, like God, create novel insights that never existed before, that create new worlds. And the angels that don't have this power are jealous, or the ignoramuses that don't have this power are jealous of those that have such creativity. Before that word is transformed into new heavens and a new earth, as it is written, I've covered you with the shadow. And of course, what does a seed do? It grows. So these words of Torah that we have create the earth anew, a new earth though, a new heavens. Regular words of Torah create new earth, and words of mystical insight, which are considered more lofty than just plain new words of Torah, create new heavens. Before the word becomes this, and it's kind of interesting to think about it, like your word, the speech act, actually becomes the material for the new place, this new earth or this new heaven.
Can I just interject? So,
Right.
first, there's a beautiful parallel between, God spoke the world into being, and now we're giving human beings a similar creative power, right? Like when you utter these new words of Torah, you're like God creating a world, creating heavens, etc. So that I think there's something really beautiful there. But I have a question. I had two questions. One was, you gave that nice gloss about the angels being jealous because they essentially, they just follow orders. They don't have the freedom to innovate. Is that just something from a midrash? Because it's not explicit here, and it's not in the note either. So, so that's my shorter question. I assume it's in the midrash somewhere, but it's a
Yeah. So regularly, all over the mystical tradition, the angels are called omdim, standing creatures, and by standing creatures, the idea is that they're not holchim. They don't go anywhere. In other words, they don't have progress, they don't have self-development, they don't sin, and they don't. So the answer is, I should probably cite a specific reference, right? That would be the honest answer to your question. Like, we'll see here, 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 and here. But the idea is so all over the mystical literature.
right.
I'm sure it has an earliest common source.
Well, no, that angels are like that. I'm very familiar with in general, but like the specific response here that they're jealous in this moment because of that I'm imagining has a more local reference.
Oh, I think I'm just assuming that in my read, and it could be a wrong assumption. I'm assuming that part of why the angels are jealous is that, one, they think we're not worthy, but that may just be a cover for it, like we're mortals and they're angels. But part of the jealousy aspect of it is, I think, in the same way that angels don't do their own, they only listen to commands. Well, then I'm making the, I guess, jump to say if they can only listen to commands and follow orders, then they can't create insights of Torah. So maybe that's part of it, but that is a supposition on my part.
All right, then I still have two more questions. I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate, but two more.
No, that's good.
One is not to follow this further, but just, as excuse me, I read the footnote on the Matt page, footnote number 186. I'm sort of thinking of issues in Christianity and medieval Christianity because, the big paradox of Christianity, Christian theology is how God could become man. And so the idea that the divine realm has a very hard distinction from the created realm is also an idea in Judaism, right? And so what's going on here in this passage and in this note is, Moses is being brought into the heavens and there's like this intercourse between the divine and human, which in some context, not Christian context, but in some contexts, would seem to be violating something very powerful. And maybe that's what the angels are upset about, right? Like the divine world is separate from the earth world. And by giving Moses this status, you're somehow breaching this boundary. So I'm defending the angels here for a moment, right? Like it's a metaphysical worry, not just jealousy is one idea.
And maybe, okay, I'm just going to deepen it because to the extent that we're all Moses, which I think is part of if this was just about Moses, they wouldn't need to write it down. They're writing it presumably to inspire people to some level of novelty. So that just increases the danger by all the people, and all the more so because most people are not the most humble person that ever existed, like Moses was, etc. And that could be why in a moment they have this counter reaction of if you mess it up, demons are going to come and kill everyone with a plague. I'm sorry. Okay, carry on.
No, that was great. No, that's great. And then just so the starting point of my actual question was, as you read this note, Moses is brought up on high and the angels are upset. And God says he's come to receive Torah. And the angels say, you kept it hidden for 974 generations. And now you want to give it to flesh and blood, right? Like how dare you? And weirdly then, God says, answer them, said the Blessed Holy One to Moses. Instead of God answering this charge of why are you giving the Torah to flesh and blood, he asks Moses to answer the charge. So I find that a little strange, unexpected. And then Moses says, Master of the universe, I fear they could scorch me. It said, I'm afraid to answer. And then God says, grasp my throne of glory and answer them. Great. So God will protect him. That's kind of what's going on in the passage we're starting with here. But now the note cuts off there and goes right to Rabbi Nachman saying that, all right, this is about God protecting Moses. But what I want to know is, how did Moses answer the angels, right? The story ends, right? At the key point, God says, answer them as why I'm giving you the Torah. and God protects him so he can answer him, but then it doesn't tell us what Moses said. So is that just the note cutting off here? Or, I mean, I could go look up, it's in the Shabbat, I guess. I can go look it up. Or does the story end there? Because that's a cliffhanger of an ending. How did Moses answer, the angels and Hashem?
That's a great question. So we're gonna answer that live.
Okay, you have the text right there. Great. And I don't mean to distract from the main thread of this.
No. The Talmud on the shelf is not only for show, though I picked up the wrong volume.
88b.
I kind of like how it leaves us to fill it in
Maybe.
as a sort of enactment of the whole principle.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be beautiful. So I'm hoping the story in the Talmud ends there, because I think that would be sort of stronger than if it gives the answer.
I will add, pick up the right Talmud here, that there does seem to be something about the move for God to tell Moses to answer them. It could be significant, maybe not, but just this notion that, if Moses is worthy of receiving the Torah, then Moses is also able to defend this. In other words, there's something about human agency which is crucial to the whole piece of it, the idea that a human would receive the Torah. And so, if humans are going to receive the Torah, they don't need God to explain it. They can explain it because they have agency. That could be kind of a little bit.
I think he'd be better equipped to explain it after he's received the Torah, because that's giving him key secrets of the universe, right? Like, maybe it's a little too much to ask Moses before the Torah to answer why he's worthy of the Torah.
So it says, these are all these great. Oh, so this is the famous story. So it's funny. He doesn't really answer them, but he engages in a dialogue with God. And this is the famous story where he asks God, well, what's in the Torah? And everything in the Torah represents something that, so the angels are seen in that midrash as representing the nations of the world. Each angel has its own flag, patriotic flag, that it represents. And every nation has something that they're, by nature of their, in that midrash at least, fundamental sinfulness, unwilling to accept. This place is unwilling to accept. I don't really want to engage in mass, what do you call it? But the point is, these people are thieves and these people are murderers and these people are that, so not going to accept the Torah. I don't want to offend everyone on Facebook Live, but that's what the midrash says. So that's my point. So there, at least, the answer is really his dialogue with God, where he says, well, what's in this Torah, God? Which actually gets to your point, Andy. He says, well, if I'm going to defend getting it, I first need to know what it is.
I thought the whole great virtue of the children of Israel was that they didn't ask what was in it first before accepting it, right? Like, we shall do and we shall hear, is at least the famous gloss is. All the other nations of the world were offered it, and they said, and presumably that's the story you're referring to, they said, what's in it? When then we'll decide whether to accept it. But the Jews said, all right, we'll take it. What's in it, right? So it would be funny if in this story, Moses is actually somehow asking what's in it before he accepts it.
Well, it's funny also because the parallel text, the next, the Na'aseh and Ishma is right there in the Gemara and Shabbos is a kind of countervailing story. So they're actually, that story, the one we're reading, and the one where they say we'll accept and then we'll figure it out, is actually presented as like an alternate view right there. I
didn't know that. I have to take something out of the oven. I'll be back in 30 seconds. Sorry. Keep going.
We will. So, okay, so we're going to carry on here. So, speaking of the oven, so God is, again, hiding or covering these words. From this, we learn that every word concealed from the eyes attains supernal value. As it is written, I have covered you with the shadow of my hand. So now we make an extended teaching, yes? First, we were saying that Moses and the angels don't want to reveal the Torah, God needs to cover or protect Moses and do it in privacy so the angels don't kill him. But now we're saying every word of Torah can't be seen by the eyes. It has to be kept secret. Words of Torah need to be kept secret so that they don't become a problem. This fits with a generic mystical idea that things which are in public view are subject to the ayin hara, to the evil eye. Yes? So now we're extending and generalizing the concept. It's not just angels and Moses. Any word of Torah you write could be subject to the evil eye, to jealousy, to people jealous of your great insight who could then view you negatively, and that would instantiate, cause real negative things in the world. Yeah, not just that they don't like you. In the Zohar's framework, that's going to cause demons and sin and danger. Yeah, so words of Torah have to be kept private. There are a million Hasidic stories about rabbis keeping their words of Torah private or saying they're not ready to come out of the oven yet, to use the metaphor that we just had happen. Right? All of these and all of those stories are some permutation of this teaching. Also, that the words of Torah need to be private. I will add, there is a sense that people too eager to publish their insights, maybe rightfully arouse some jealousy. Like, in other words, people are going to say, well, like, why are you so full of yourself? And it's going to cause that, right? So they're now getting into the kind of psychodynamics of, Torah insight and the competitive aspects of it. Okay. As it is written, I have covered you with the shadow of my hand. Why was it covered and hidden from view? For the sake of supernal value, as is written, to plant heavens and establish earth, as already explained. So in order for these words of Torah to properly do what they can do, which is create new worlds, their deep creative power counterintuitively lies in their privacy. And of course, the Zohar, which is a non-revealed text, passed on generation to generation, not written, is the perfect demonstration of private. But of course, lots of people are studying it, so it's not entirely private. Okay. Any kind of reflections on private versus public teaching at this moment, or we'll move forward?
Yeah, I'm thinking the privacy is also, I'm looking at footnote 187, about a kind of mystical quality that's preserved if it's not visible. Because if it's visible, it can be quantifiable. But if it's invisible, it can be non-conceptual and positivistic, which is to say it can partake of that act of creation, which is ultimately mysterious.
Yes, there's a sense in which this needs to be as invisible, as intangible as possible. I was going to say as humanly possible, as divinely possible, so that it can reach that place of Keter before worlds exist to recreate them. It sort of needs to reach up to a place beyond words. And the only way to really do that is not to make it very concrete. Also, as some of the Hasidic tradition understood this, the ideas themselves shouldn't be defined all that much. In other words, they could be said in their most basic or abstract form. There's a way in which it's not just about the visibility of the idea, but it's about the detail or the specificity in which the detail is presented versus the generality of it. The more general, the more it includes. The less it excludes, the more possibility, and the more, the higher the ontological superiority, in a sense. Okay. Next section. Lemor Litzion, so this is just moving on in the verse in Isaiah. Lemor Litzion ami ata. Lemor le'inun tarinu milin dimitziyanin ilin al ilin ami ata. Al tikre ami ata ela imi ata. Lemeheve shutfa imi. Ma'ana b'milula dili avadim shemayim va'aretz kama da'at amar b'dvar Hashem shemayim na'asu uf hachi'at. Zakain inun demishtadle be'oraita v'itema demila d'chol barnash d'lo yada avid da. So this is kind of crazy. by crazy, I mean radical. So there's this famous take on this verse, "Lemor Letzion Ami Ata." What the Gemara says, a very famous Gemara, by very famous, they always say never say very famous. Someone won't know it, they'll feel bad. I don't know. It's quoted a lot. I've heard it a lot. Maybe you've heard it a lot. Like the things I don't know are not famous to me. Maybe they're famous to others. That what does it mean, Sha'arei Tzion? The phrase occurs a lot, Sha'arei Tzion, the gates of Zion. So the Gemara, because it's a halachic work, we interpret them as Sha'arim HaMetziyanim Ba'halacha. Zion comes from the root marker, but the root, the word for the adjective for excellent, Mitzuyan, is of course because it's marked. It's I don't know. It stands out. Yes, excellent work is distinguished. That's the English word I'm looking for. So distinguished can be like Zion really just means like distinguished, like it's a place marker. It stands out on the map because it's the Temple Mount. But here, so in the Gemara, it's Jewish law. It's gates of it's Zion isn't a place because it's of course post-exilic. Zion is halacha. We enter the land of Israel in this rabbinic spiritual take on it by Jewish law. Every time we engage Jewish law or study Jewish law or Talmud in the Talmudic version of it, we are entering Zion. We're entering the holy distinct. And the more excellent our Jewish legal interpretations, the more we're in Zion. You know, it's not it's excellence is part of it's not just people of the book. It's like people of the good book, but not the good book of the Bible. Like your book better be very good. So to say to Zion, you are me, my people. So the Zohar is going to have its mystical version of this teaching. To say to those gates, those distinguished words, those above those, you are Ami, Amiata. Do not read you are Ami, my people, but rather you are Imi, with me, becoming a shutaf, a business partner. So we become God's business partner in this new plan to create the world. So this is crazy. When our words, our mitzuyanim, are distinguished enough, we become with God. We enter, so this is just, what some discomfort expressed before with like Moses entering God. Now we are all entering to become partnered as humans directly with God in the act of creation. Just as I made heaven and earth by speaking, as it is said by the word of Hashem, the heavens were made, so do you. Uvhachiat. This is the Zohar becoming its most, I think is at its most radical. You create the world just like God did it. There's not even a kegavana here. The Zohar loves to say, like, so to speak, in the way that this happens, but not quite because you're human. But here it doesn't even qualify it. It just says you're like God, really.
It makes sense because, what's the world ultimately or really? It's not the physical creation that we inhabit. It's the Torah or halacha is like the spiritual ideal, which is the essence of the world.
Yeah.
And if by our speech and innovating in halacha, we're creating halacha, which is a separate, we'll come back to that at some point, then we are doing the very same action that God was doing, right? We're creating the spiritual essence of the world. So we don't have to say we're here literally creating like a physical earth, because we're obviously not doing that, but we're creating the essence of that thing.
So for the Zohar, it's even creating the physical earth. There is a sense that I'm just gonna, it's the full range of it, right? So it's like this physical earth would not exist in this way if your word of Torah creates a physical world. And so there were, theurgic Kabbalists that believed that you could really create things by using but this is the theological underpinning for how is it the Kabbalists feel they can suddenly actually make things like alchemy, like how are they creating things?
Right.
And so the answer is, well, this is the theological underpinning of it, is that our words really take on this deeply creative power. So it's not just a metaphor, though that is true. Everything you said is true. I think the Zohar even means it.
Yeah.
Now here, just to note, the Gemara talks about it in terms of halacha, but I think the Zohar is working with the preface of its prior teaching that it's saying like insights in halacha, which are kind of regular to create new earth, but new heavens are created through mystical insights. So they're even saying, kind of the ideal new word is the mystical word. Now we're going to get to, this is a scary thing to say, which is why we're scared now. Tachasi. Ahu delav orche. Berazin Toraita, Vechidish Milin de la Yada Albor Yaihon, Kidakaya Uta, Himila Salka Vanapik Lagabe Himila, Ish Tafuchot, Shon Shakar, Migo Nukva, Ditmoa Rabba, Vidalik Hamishmea Parsi la Kabbalah, Himila Vanati Lava Azabe Himila Lago Nukve, Babi Barikea de Shav de Ikre Tohu, Vitasba Hurakia, Ahu Ish Tafuchot, Shita Alfe Parse Bizimna Chada, Kevan Tahirakia Deshav Kaim Nafkat Miad, Eshet Znunim, Va'atkif Bahu Rakia Deshav, different versions of it. We can consult Daniel Matt for what the accurate version is. I don't know. V'ishtat pat be umitamana navkat v'katlat kama alfin v'rivavan begin to katkaimet bahu rakia itba reshuvia chalt lemeve tas kol alma b'riga chada. So there's this idea, just, that, and it's in the Talmud, but it's in other places too, that angels have different numbers of steps they have to take. And like the more bad their task is, like, messenger of doom and gloom, the more steps God gives them to have to, like, the more legs of their journey, more layovers, to give people time to repent, to give, some interceding mystic time to stop it, whatever your theology of it is, to cause the bad thing not to happen. A last chance. But there's a notion that at times of plague, war, or upheaval, destructive demons operate in one fell swoop. They don't have layovers in their journey. Now, this could be, I guess, a tough one to read now because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but we'll read it. Count this passage among the passages called Pandemic Torah. Now, if you say that the word, by the way, just to be clear, I do not believe personally, in case someone accuses me of this, that people who are, well, maybe I do believe it. I was going to say I don't believe it. That people who innovate bad words of Torah, cause the death of people in violent plagues, and that's the cause of plagues. However, and maybe this is the time to be frank and sharp, I have heard lots of kind of bizarre teachings of Torah which justify or even glorify non-responsible behavior and non-halachic behavior, like not wearing masks or not taking it seriously or being oddly macho and killing people and that kind of thing. And so actually, it could be in a very real way that bad words of Torah, in fact, lead to massive death and plague. And so that would be, okay. So if you say the word of any ignorant person has the same effect, come and see. So how do we know whose Torah is real? So we got to this last time, but I wanted to review back because I didn't know that we got to do it in the full depth. And I think it's good to sometimes like retrace and come. And this is kind of where we ended. So one who is unaccustomed to the mysteries of Torah and innovates words he does not fully understand, al-bor yahun in the Aramaic, don't understand it fully. Al-bor yav clearly is actually the better kind of sense of it. You don't have a clear understanding. Who has a clear understanding of mystical concepts. When that word ascends, ish tafuchot, a man of perversity, tongue of falsehood, bursts forth from the chasm of the immense abyss, leaping 500 parsecs to obtain that word. So this is Samael. We have the great demon in the Zohar who's making his first appearance for us. Enter stage left. In some places they wouldn't say his name so as not to wake him up, but we're going to take the more intellectual approach today. For that purpose, I'm going to say his name. But sometimes the Zohar avoids doing it for that reason, if you're wondering. I learned from people that would never say his name, but I also learned from people that would. To obtain that word. So he takes the word, grabbing her, he takes the word back to his chasm and transmogrifies it into a distorted heaven called Tohu, chaos. This man of perversity flies through that heaven 6,000 parsecs in one glide as soon as, and that, by the way, is meant as like, normally can't go anywhere. It takes 10 legs of a trip to get anywhere. And here it's just, we're like on the Concorde. As soon as the distorted heaven is established, what was it? Eshed Znunim, a woman of whoredom. This, they're referring to Lilith, Adam's first rejected feminist wife in the teachings. Yes. See the feminist magazine Lilith, which proudly reclaims her as a figure, a heroine. So the we'll get Lilith more if we do this for years, and we'll get all of the demons more. So emerges clinging to it, joining with it. So now we have the kind of coupling. Before we had the coupling of us and God in this fertile relationship to create new worlds. And here we have a parallel demonic couple. Yes, if that has a sort of union, as it were. It's not Israel and God, but Lilith sort of taking our place as the sort of embodied or feminine, tangible bad figure, and Samael is the more ethereal, divine bad figure, causing what? Causing death. From there, she sits up killing thousands, myriads. For as long as she endures in that moment, she is empowered to swoop through the entire world in a single moment and kill everyone. So that's bad. Okay.
Maybe this is a silly question, but you would think the system, the metaphysical system, the Zohar or God would set up would be such that words like these, words uttered by the ignorant person, the bad words of Torah, wouldn't be able to ascend, right? This only happens because they ascend and then they trigger all these negative things. But why do bad words ascend in the same way that the good words? Wouldn't you want to shut that down if you could?
Right, and also, it's funny, we had the metaphor before of a key. I don't know if you remember the key unlocking secret doors, right? And you say, like, if the key doesn't fit, or OJ, if the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit, right? So, like, it shouldn't work. Shouldn't work. That's the point. Okay, we won't do that again. So, apologies. So so right. So, like, the key shouldn't, if the key doesn't fit, it's not going to open the door, but lead you to a dungeon instead. It just won't open the door. So I think that's because there's a sense in which there's a power to mystical words that is beyond the human, right? This is part of the magical sense of the Jewish mystical tradition, that these words have power which we can't fully rationalize. And so even if we're working with them incorrectly, we're still working with them. Or in other words,
yeah, I'm sorry, but as you say that, this is what's good about this is it gives human beings they have to be responsible for our Torah, right? We have to think, because if bad words just couldn't rise, then you don't have to worry about what you say, because either you're saying a good word and you're doing the good thing, or if you say a bad word, it just dies there and doesn't do anything. But when you recognize that your bad words of Torah in this passage can have these horrible consequences, then that really puts this burden of responsibility on you to be careful with your Torah. So I think there's actually a good consequence of this system.
I think the metaphor of chemistry may be helpful here. I'm recalling fondly now, and not then, when I accidentally caused a small explosion in my high school chemistry lab with my lab partner. Greg, if you're watching, do you remember that? Any event, so yeah, there was a problem. We, didn't carefully follow the instructions and put whatever, forget the wrong thing in, and boom, before we knew it, we had to activate the hood and flee for our lives. So there's a sense in which words of Torah are like chemicals, and if you mix the wrong ones together, you might blow something up, which is true. So I think that's why the Zohar says it. It's not just because of like the strategic move. It is true, right, that mystical teachings gone awry can cause chaos, spiritual chaos. Look at Shabtai Tzvi, or look at strains of, there are certainly strains of terrorism inspired by Islamist, right? Like, in other words, words of religion can inspire bad, and if we want to go Jewish too, we can look at words of Jewish religion, both in a pandemic context or in others, that encourage violence. Right? So maybe it's better to be internal and not accuse others. But the point is, yeah, it's true that bad mystical teachings cause really bad things. They're not just neutral. So I think they want to kind of raise the ante on both sides of the ledger here. Great mystical insights help you become like God, or God nearly, to create the world, but do it wrong and you cause a plague. Now I would think, and this is kind of the problem, that once you put maybe this is, I always thought I was relatively willing to take risks, but once the risk is that high, Like maybe we should shut down the Zohar class, you know? Like, in other words, is that worth it? Is that worth it? Like, that's a big cost, right? Yeah, Peter.
Um, the examples that you're giving of how bad Torah causes problems, all are bad Torah that's shared, whereas the insights were supposed to be kept secret. Is that a breakdown in the parallelism, or is it point to the fact that a teaching that is secret is in some sense not really a teaching? I'm still stuck on the...
Right, you know, I'm trying to think, like, so say you come up with the most wonderful insight you think, but it turns out it's like wrong in some objective way, but you don't know it. And it's deeply flawed. And you just write it down in a diary and never show it to anyone. Does that cause the destruction described, or does one need to promote that teaching in any way? Now, it certainly won't cause anything, you know, obvious in the natural chain of events if you never show anyone, because no one knows about it. But what about just in the mystical world? And I don't know, do you have a sense, does anyone have a sense of whether that is in fact what we're talking about, or is that even not beyond? That's just sort of development of thought. That's a great question. We'll leave the question.
Well, no, it's a great question. And I was thinking a version of it a little earlier, like we're praising innovation, but also praising keeping it private. But those, they're not contradictions, but it seems like, what's the point of an innovation if you're the only one, like a good innovation if you're the only one who knows it, right? Like it seems like it wants to be shared. So I'm having trouble understanding the value of the privacy part of it. But then Peter's question applies it here, right? You probably don't want to penalize someone just thinking to himself a dangerous word of Torah, because otherwise no one will, the risks are too great, as you were just saying, Rabbi, right? Like, who's going to risk it? Oh my God, I shouldn't even think that thought because I might unleash the demons. So you don't want to do that. So you need to have sort of freedom of thought, to use like classic liberal terms, like freedom of thought to even think horrible, horrible things. But then the responsibility comes when you publicize them, when you share them. And that's the point where you get to say, oh, am I confident enough of this that I'm going to publicize it? And but then again, it doesn't quite fit with the first passage where the word seems to be rewarded for staying private. So I don't quite.
And in the mystical system of the Sfirot, switch to Sfirot chart, it's important to note that Yesod, this place where words fly up, you know, words are originated in Malchut and jump to Yesod and fly directly up to Keter on this highway here, I-95, let's call it. And so the Yesod is tzaddik, right? So there's the sense of the Zohar that the righteous person doesn't actually need to teach anyone the teaching to get the benefit. I think that's very clear, that a righteous individual, just by thinking these things, can create new worlds or influence this world to improve it, just by having the right thoughts and intentions, and doesn't need to do anything. And certainly the Hasidic tradition developed this further by having sort of myriads of people serve the Rebbe and basically take care of his needs. And they only get the leftovers. Like that's really the conception of it. They get the leftovers of the teaching, the leftovers of the food, just the leftovers, the scraps. So, because it's not important. What's important, most important, is that the tzaddik, the righteous person, has the most elevated thoughts. It's an elitist kind of approach, as much as it's radically egalitarian in the same time. So, so it is, I think, true, definitely the way these passages were understood, that the thoughts don't need to be shared to have the good effects, the positive effects, really. There can be naturalistic positive effects to sharing great thoughts. Other people also think them and build on them, etc. But so that would imply, just taking this one step further, that the bad thoughts also, but that, even if not shared, but that raises a problem for thought. Like, how can you think? The way thought works is like, and what if you like think the thought and say, no, that's a bad thought? Like, like that's how you reject thoughts. You have to first think it and even empathize with it in the kind of Talmudic way of like, well, like what's of merit in this opinion? And then you can reject it. You know, even good rejection of an opinion, you know, that isn't done out of fear involves like trying to see if it has merit first and trying to justify it. I'm a lawyer, right? We try and justify any position of our clients. So in the strongest way possible, if it's plausible. So, okay, did a hand, I see a hand, Karen.
Yeah, I just wanted to complicate the possibility of that sharing a thought
Oh no, she froze.
is necessarily to make it not private. Oh, I froze.
Oh, you're back. Sharing a thought is, yeah, we
Is
got you.
not necessarily the same thing as making it not private. In other words, there are different ways that language can operate such that you can articulate a thought and still have dimensions of that thought remain obscure.
Mm.
And so maybe the question is, are you sharing a thought in such a way that it's all spelled out in the way that footnote 187 was saying it's quantifiable and positivistic, etc., or is your insight multidimensional in such a way that there are always some hidden or esoteric aspects to it?
Which is how the Torah works in general, right? It's got different levels of meaning, and there's parts that like everybody can grasp, and then there's the deeper, more secret parts, right? So
Yeah.
that's a very good point.
Thanks.
And also like, right, and you're not supposed to share the Zohar before to people under 40 who are not men, right? So like, there's all this
kids or not married or
yeah, right. So there's
don't
always
have full beards, don't have this, aren't loved by everyone, aren't perfectly upright, don't know the whole Talmud, the whole Bible, all the rest.
Right. So that, the Zohar is somewhat public because there's a select group that can be privy to it, but it's not widely public. So there's a lot of degrees here of what it is to publicize something. I think that's really right.
And here it is on Svaria, available for free to anyone in the world with an internet browser.
That's right.
Well, even that's a good example that it's public and yet esoteric, that all these dimensions can be unpacked from it, which are not necessarily immediately apparent.
It's still esoteric because it's, in order, even understanding the words, then there's the level of experiential understanding of really getting what it's saying, which is yet. We'll do one more passage. V'alda k'tiv, oy moshche avon bechavlei hashva, avon da dechura.
We still see the separatic tree.
Oh, you still see the, I have to switch the share. Thank you, sorry.
Thanks.
V'alda k'tiv, oy moshche avon bechavlei hashva, avon, it's quoting from Isaiah, avon da dechura v'cha'avot agala chata'a man chata'a da nukva dekre chata'a ihu mashech ahu dekre avon b'inu chavlei hashav levater ka'avot agala chata'a hinukva dekre chata'a v'detaman ititakpat lemevetas v'kalta b'nei nasha ידע כי רבים חללים הפילה, מן הפילה, דה היא חטאה דקטלית בני נשה. מן גרים דה, תמיד חכם, דלמד להוראה ומורה, רחמנא לישזמן. Rachmana litzlan in the Aramaic version of it. God save us. So, concerning this, it is written, woe unto them who haul iniquity, that's avon in the pasuk, with cords of falsehood, and sin, that's chata'ah, as with a cart rope. So just the plain understanding, this is classic prophetic parallelism of using words to deepen the meaning, right? So avon, I think in the pshat sense, has a sense more of iniquity being maybe more like negligence, maybe not. We can discuss that, but in this pasuk, it seems that way a little bit. And chait is a little bit more something you're more culpable for, but all bad. Okay, in any event, we can debate that, but it's two words, avon and chait. So iniquity is the male who is sin? The female. So this is just completing the parallelism of the sort of male-female creativity of the good word in the demonic side of the tree. By the way, again, if anyone is interested in the demonic, Nathaniel Berman over at Brown just has a new book out on the demonic side of the Zohar. So if you're interested in these demonic stories, he has literally just written the book on the subject. And he's right here in Providence. Maybe we should invite him to guest lecture one day on demons. But in any event, I have not read the book, so I don't want to endorse a book I haven't read, but he's great with the Zohar and many other things, good human beings. So check out his book on demons in the Zohar, okay? And if you're listening, Professor Berman, we just gave you a plug. Okay, so who is sin? The female. Yeah, so we're doing, this thing where the male, and again, remember, normally the male, Kadosh Baruch Hu, in the Zohar is like Tiferet, and the female is Malchut, Shechina. The male is Yisod, this is the phallus. Malchut is Shechina. Sometimes the female's Bina, this is the mother, this is the daughter. We've talked about that. This is the husband. So now we're doing that on the demonic side, and we're creating a male and a female. We're creating Avon and Chet. So he hauls the one called iniquity with those cords of falsehood. Notice what makes it like the transportation mode of all of this are lies, misinformation, disinformation. And then sin as with a cart rope, that female called sin, who is empowered there to fly and kill human beings. So many are those she has struck dead. Who has struck them dead? The sin who slays human beings. Who causes this? A disciple who is not higia lehora, someone who starts teaching but is unqualified to teach. May God save us. So this is a kind of take on this idea of the sons of Aaron. Others is very prominent in the Gemara. The discussion really is in Sanhedrin in the Talmud, if you're interested, in the kind of fullest version of the discussion about Hora'ah, who is entitled to teach and why. But the point is, if someone teaches and isn't really qualified to teach, they're the people that cause this bad interpretation to go forth. So that just kind of completes that cycle. Okay, now there's kind of a practical takeaway. Oh, I have to switch the share. I'm just switching, but not, okay.
Go on. I just want to ask again about a footnote. Footnote 197 in that text was contrasting the person who is not qualified to teach but teaches with the person who is qualified to teach but doesn't. And so basically I'm trying to figure out, how do you know what you are?
How do you know what you are? And so I think here, right, I think they're just, I don't know, but I think if a person has enough, I feel bad. Here I am leading a study group of the Zohar, so like I don't know that I'm called. But the point is that Rav Moshe Feinstein had a good practical take. They interviewed him for the New York Times back when, and asked him, how did you become this great posek, this great religious decisive? How do you know that you're worthy? He has all novel insights. I'm looking at my set now over there. That's why I'm looking over there, right? It's full of novel insights. And how did he know that he could do this? And he said, well, they asked me questions and they kept coming back. So, there's a very pragmatic answer. Because he was just running a small yeshiva on the Lower East Side, right? And people kept asking him questions. Now his answers are brilliant, but they are novel. So, if people keep coming back for more. So that's one way, I guess, if you're worthy to teach, is if anyone's listening. Of course, that couldn't be the only metric. It could be that some teachers are so smart or brilliant that they're beyond their students or bore them.
And you want worthy students to be the ones who are coming back to listen to you, right? So,
right.
Well, I'm caught by this. I mean, at least in English, the word disciple. So it's not just about someone teaching who shouldn't be teaching or vice versa, whatever, but it's specifically a disciple. So
it's a talmid. Yeah, it's a student of someone. So this person is engaged in this version of it in however formal it was, formal rabbinic education. It is like a rabbi's chief student who isn't ready yet, but it's someone who's in the it's plausible. That's a good
So
point.
it's not just like a bad apple who's setting up independent shop to teach whatever he or she wants. It's like someone who's in the system, presumably has some degree of smicha or something, right? Like it's not just nobody.
They have some basic competency, yeah.
That makes it scary because now we don't know who's who, because it's one thing if you said, you better be in the academy before you start teaching, because that's at least a quality control. But now even people in the academy, some of them should be teaching and some of them should not be. So I'm wondering, because I know.
Well, I'll turn it around. You're in a university, so you don't have to mention names, but everyone there probably has where you're in a college, everyone has a PhD, or most people, right? And many of them are brilliant and experts in their subject matter.
And many of them are quacks, right?
Yeah. I don't think anyone who went to college or is right knows that. You got a comment?
Adam has to go.
Oh, Adam, it was great seeing you, even if we didn't see your face. We were glad you were with us. We love you. Okay. Yes. So we'll say many of them are quacks. We'll say it like that. So, there's this sense in which I think they're just encouraging people to be careful. By putting this, anyone who learns this is going to think twice and maybe do it better, right? The upshot is you're going to think about what you're going to say a little more before you say it. So I would say I prepare for the Zohar more than any other class I've ever taught, for fear of messing up the Zohar. Because the Zohar itself is so afraid of it. I'm a Rabbi Shimon. I'll just conclude this note and then let us go. This is the concluding note from Rabbi Shimon to the Chavraya after all this back and forth. B'matusa minaychu delotafku mipumaychu miladaraisa delayadaton delashematon meilana ravrava kedaki ud begin delatevon garmin lehu chata alakatala uchlusin devarnash lematna patchu kulon v'amrachmana l'shezvan. So, just to conclude it, Rabbi Shimon said to the Chevraya, the group, I beg of you not to utter a word of Torah that you do not know and have not heard properly from a lofty tree. One way is you don't say anything you weren't taught, then you won't violate this, lest you enable sin to slay multitudes without cause. Now, but of course, everyone is innovating new ideas constantly. So,
and we're praising innovation, right? That's the starting point of this whole last segment, is how praiseworthy innovation is. So that's.
Yeah, so this is, I think, just embodying a moment of fear, that ultimately subsides at some point because people innovate. And then they all open saying, God, may the compassionate one save us. May the compassionate one save us. Next time, we will get to the words Breshit bara, Elohim et, and we will discuss for the first time, really, in the Zohar, the four worlds. We focused almost exclusively on the Sfirot, but next time we will get to worlds of Atzilut and Bria and Yetzirah and Asiya, four worlds alluded to in the Zoharic teaching, and this notion of God looking into the Torah and creating the world, which is I think that is very famous. I'll call that famous, that God looks into the Torah and creates the world. And the Zoharic version of not just the world, but four worlds. So we'll be there next time. So I think we've kind of concluded this section of it. And the link, of course, is we create worlds, but how did God create the world? How did God create the world through Torah? So if we create worlds through Torah, now we're going to look at God's creation of the world through Torah, which is a natural flow. So I thank everyone for joining us. Next week, same Zoom channel, same Zoom time. Be prepared to enter alternate.
And next week is next Wednesday.
Next week is next Wednesday. We will be meeting.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much.
God bless you all.
Thanks
Thank you.
Bye.